All right, everyone. We are here at another week of Page for My Book. As with every week, this is no different. Y'all are about to be blessed with the most dynamic insight and conversation because I have just one of my favorite, honestly, whether he wants to be or not, he's just a strong peer mentor. I look up to him, I respect him heavily. So I'm glad to give y'all a peek into what he has to say. You can send your funds. I'm just joking, no, but no, this is going to be free knowledge for sure. I'm aware of it. So as we kick this whole episode off, I'm going to let him introduce himself because no one else can do it better. Uh, so Kevin, let's tell the people about who you are, what you do, all of it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. Excited, I check you out all the time, and I'll shoot you a text here and there about it. So I'm glad to be here. So it's kind of hard to figure out where you're going to start, but I always lead off with I'm from Detroit.
That's a great place.
Always, I like
Mhm.
to let people know I ain't from
Okay.
here, and here is
Yeah,
Chicago, but I love it. But I'm from Detroit.
absolutely.
Kevin Davis from Detroit Public Schools, Redford High School with Eastern Michigan. Um, I'm a marketing and branding professional. Love my city, love my circle. I love everything marketing and branding.
Mhm.
That's like the short and sweet of who I am, and I'm a lifelong learner.
Absolutely. I love how you humbly said marketing and branding professional. Because I would probably say like guru or extraordinaire, but for humility's sake, I'll let you just own the professional. But I think to say it's a passion of yours would be an understatement. I think that it's very few times that you'll find someone who loves diving deeper into marketing and branding outside of just what they do.
Hmm.
Just being honest. A
Yeah.
lot of us landed here for a whole myriad of reasons. And we're just holding on. I mean, I'm not saying that's me. I'm just saying that
Hmm.
is speaking on behalf of the industry. But
That
then
is true.
something that you love, you dig a little bit deeper, you ask different questions, you explore, you create. And that's with anything that you're super passionate about. So, I mean, yes, you can say professional. We'll allow it. What is it that you're most passionate about when it comes to branding? Just because that is such, I don't want to say anomaly because I want to say no one's out there, but
Yeah.
you do go, you lean in.
I think for me, it's what's all behind it. When people think of branding, they think of the visual pieces, the logo, the colors, and all of that, and that's all great. But the more time I spend in this field, for me, it's finding out what are the motivations behind people. What is it that draws them into a brand? What is it that makes it a great place to work? What is the culture of an organization? All of those types of things, they all build the brand. And so for me, my background is a little non-traditional. I started out as a um, photographer, which then went to graphic design. Then I dabbled in social media, and then it just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper.
Mhm.
And then I just found my path, and that's the marketing and branding piece. So each level you keep unlocking, you realize how much further away from the outward marketing it really is. And I feel like that's my sweet spot.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really getting behind the look and feel of things and really understand how does it work.
Hmm.
Not even from like a consumer side, but internally, that's always been my focus
Yeah.
because in my career, I didn't have anyone to teach me any of that. And so you just kind of learn on the fly and say, this is a great place to work. Why is it great? Or why are these things this way? Or why is it when you think of this company, everyone says the same thing, whether they work there or they shop there or they support it. Um, and so it's just fascinating for me. And that I think for me that started with like car brands, being from Detroit. Why are people so drawn to these brands, and why do people want to work there? And then as I got older, went more into like higher education,
Okay.
thinking
Okay.
about University of Michigan.
Hmm.
What is it about that brand and the athletics and all of that goes into it? And so that's like where I am,
Yeah.
just kind of locked into what's behind the scenes of the marketing and branding, but mostly the people behind it that make it great.
Yeah. I do hear a lot of marketing and branding professionals really talk about a lot of the root cause for why they got in the business has to do with the curiosity of people.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome. And then I thought the other thing that was just interesting is when you were just kind of like, okay, you started in social, I went to graphic design and kind of build, and then out of that curiosity, you know, you were like, I want to ask the why behind it. And I always have been fascinated because what came to my mind when you said that, it was, you know, when I was growing up, I took piano lessons. And so I got kind of locked into learning how to play the piano with notes. And if you ask me to play anything outside of that, I'm like hot cross buns. Like I got you on the 3 notes. But I've always been like super fascinated with people who learn by ear because I swear they can play anything. And so when you were just talking about like, oh no, that wasn't the training that I went into to go into. I just was curious enough to study it on my own. I asked the right question.
It's funny you say that,
Yeah.
because on a music tip, so I taught myself how to play drums.
See?
I don't know how to read the music, but I taught myself how to play. So
Yeah.
that's always, now that I'm older, I can look back and see whether it's professionally, like sports,
Right.
everything I've done, it has been through curiosity and just learning on my own.
Yep.
It's not, oh, my dad put me in this program or put me on this team. It's, that looks fun. Let me try it and let me pay my dues and work my way up.
Yeah.
And that's been it.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but
I mean, and I can, it's interesting because I know that you're great at what you do, obviously at your job, and even with the story you're telling about drums, I think there's something that people should latch onto, like where do you naturally lean in? Where are you naturally curious? Because therein could lie, you know, your passion, your desire, your profession, or a profession that feels a little bit more natural than I'm just here for the check. I mean, don't get me wrong, because, you know, shout out to it, but I think there's something to that in that approach or philosophy. Because even as you were saying, I'm like, dang, you know, and I know we've talked about a lot of like, where do I want to be through the past couple of years? And I genuinely, and I was just telling you, you know, before we started the podcast, like I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be, but a large part of that is like, I've always been curious in this space.
Yeah.
I've always been curious in the faith-based space, and I can do that in my sleep, and it doesn't feel like I'm just like, gosh, here we go again at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm gonna do it regardless of where I am, where I'm working. So I love that bit of insight that you gave, and I think my hunch is that if you are listening, that might be, and you're kind of seeking out that next step, or even feeling like, why is this person always just, this looks like easy flowing water and I feel like I'm swimming, you know, against the current. What is, asking yourself, what's feeling natural, or what is that, where do you normally lean into, or where are you normally curious? Because there might be a really solid answer behind that, which I think is pretty cool.
So I do think about it a lot, like where I spend my time.
Yeah.
And if I had to kind of distill it or reduce it down, I am a team player.
Okay. Yep.
Sports, you know, I'm like, oh, I can do that, and I like the camaraderie of that. You know, in the choir, playing, you know, the drums, and I'm like, okay, let me jump down there, let me see how that is, and thinking about my particular focus professionally, it's teams.
Yep.
It's how do I move this organization forward from a marketing perspective, but then also straddling this line of leadership development. So if I invest in the team, we can move forward as an organization. So I just love being a part of team, but also leading teams. And that's about sports. I became captain of the baseball team. I never played before high school, never.
Yeah.
And then I jumped on and played golf, got my varsity letter there. And so it's like, whatever I jump into, I commit, and I'll do very well at. And what I had to do as I got older was realize I can't just do the things that I'm good at because I'm good at them. I need to learn how to do things because that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you find, from that exploration and being curious, it works professionally, because you can say, I've tried that. I've done social, I've done the PR piece, I've done communications, internal comms, external affairs. So I can say I don't want to do those, but then I also now at this point, as I'm managing that team, I know exactly what you all are doing. So I'm not leading from a place of theory.
Yes.
I'll tell you what happened from when I was in those seats. So there's
I love
benefits,
that. I
but you
love
got to
that.
know when to pull it back.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love all of that. And I think there's clearly a certain amount of confidence and courage you have to kind of move in that way. But I think that's something that we all need to tap into because to your point, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And
And you can't be afraid to put in the work. You can't get around it.
at all, at all. Which kind of leads me to my next point because you know, I think it's fair to say, and you touched on it earlier when you were talking about like where you are now, and then as you look back on that journey of like touching all these different businesses or industries, and it's interesting to me because it's human nature to really plan out and have it lined up, and of course we have different mindsets from when we are in our 20s and 30s and whatnot, and beyond. So when you were thinking about, when you were first in that creative design or social space, what did you feel that you wanted to go into? Like, why was that the initial door that you came into? And then where you are now, obviously, you kind of talked about that journey along the process, but even more so, um, talk about how open you have to be to being nimble to your journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say I'll say that in the beginning, there was no plan. There's no plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty candid about this, but a lot of this got kickstarted because I lost my job and I dropped out of college.
Okay.
Nobody would hire me, so I had to start my own business. And so then I did that, and I knew that I wanted to pivot. Work for yourself is a hustle. It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody at the same phase.
Right.
So
Right.
I may go back to that at some point full time anytime soon. No, I'll keep my business, but I like my day checks too.
Right.
But so for me, it was let me dabble in these spaces. So it was design and photography first, and then I was working for myself, and then I went to some clients, and then I moved to Chicago, and I couldn't find a job. They're like, you ain't from here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know you. Chicago's real network clicky.
That's so much.
Real network clicky, unlike Detroit. And first 2 years, I was honestly like, maybe it's time to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't get interviews. I couldn't get in, and I messed around and got a job at Target.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't even hire me in management. I was overnight pulling pallets at Target on Roosevelt and Clark.
That's absolutely.
And so a friend of mine I went to Eastern Michigan with came in one day and was like, oh man, hey, I need you over at UIC. And he's like, I don't have a role yet, but I know what you can do because even though I had my job at Target, nobody knew I worked there other than me complaining ambiguously, but I was still building my craft and learning new things, learning software. And so he pulled me over there. And so it was just graphic design. And I'm like, this is not really what I want to do, but it's at the university. It's a foot in the door. Mm-hmm. Let me get in and make some moves. And so then that became manager of digital and design. And then it kind of got on track from there. So for me, it was all happenstance. And I ended up just doing what people would pay me to do before I moved to Chicago. And then when I got here, it was like, well, you're going to do what we're willing to give you.
Right.
But I think for me, what's important is, for those that end up in that situation where you have experience. At this point, I had like 5 or 6 years experience with my own business to come here and get humbled and think, you know what, I got bills to pay. I got a wedding that we're trying to pay for. My boys were 10 and 8 at the time. And it was a humbling experience, but you have to start over sometimes. But keeping in mind, I'm here today, but I know I'm destined for something bigger.
Yeah.
So here today, I got to keep working on, it's what I call driving in 2 lanes today in that fast lane. And that just kind of jump started, but it was rough. It was terrible. I hated it. I ended up working both jobs for 3 months. So 9 p.m. to 7 in the morning, then from 10 to 2, 10 to 4 at UIC, coming to sleep. But it was like, that was my passion. I need to get in here and do what I have to do. So it was all happenstance at that point.
Yeah.
I just kind of fumbled into it.
I gotta ask you to expound a little bit on just and I'm trying to figure out how I want to phrase the question, but the need to sometimes be okay with the reset,
Yeah.
and also not one, the mindset of being okay with the reset, the understanding that there's nothing wrong with holding true to what you know you want to do,
Yeah.
but also doing what you need to do.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think, I don't want to go a blanket on everything, but I sometimes think people get lost in that, or feel like, well, if I press reset, that's not being true to my dream, or I'm too educated, fill in the blank, to go back and do this. Go back being relative. Just talk about that.
I think part of it now is it's optics, right? Everyone wants to, it's funny, if you look on social media, everybody's a director. Everyone's leading something.
Right.
Everyone's a director. No, there's no one that's a manager. There's no one that's an assistant. There's no one that's a coordinator. And so I think some of it is just kind of driven by wanting to flex, and everybody wants to be a boss because that's the sign of success.
Yeah.
But as you know, we've been in this marketing and advertising space. Those titles don't mean anything. I know coordinators that are making $120,000, $140,000 a year. I know directors that's making 50.
Yep.
So, and then the other part of it is we have an inflated sense of self, which I had to realize. And then the other part is we lack mentors, and we lack representation of what's possible.
That's good.
When I moved here in 2009 or so, I didn't know any of this was even a possibility that I do. Everybody else, you know, they knew about the field and all. I had no idea. And so for me to have my own business, I have a decent client base and notoriety in Detroit, to come here to start over, pulling pallets overnight at Target was very humbling, but I didn't let that define me. And I think that's important. Like I said, certain people knew I worked there, but for me, it was like, well, I don't need to tell everybody where I work. They just know I got a job.
Correct.
And I show up where I need to show up, but I'm still promoting me. And so you got to humble yourself. And it could just be a year. It could be 2 years, or it could be longer, but you have to be committed to it, because sometimes that's what's going to happen. What's the alternative? You can't force success. And so it's okay to start over. And sometimes when you have to start off, you skip some steps somewhere, some training experiences, and you go back, and now you're older, and you can say, I appreciate this training. So I hated Target. Everybody knows that. But what I loved was the management and leadership training that they gave me while I hated being there. So I said, let me take all of this in. One, because I don't know how long I'm gonna be here.
Facts.
And then two, they trained me and they poured into me. Let me be appreciative of where I am, but I'm still trying to get the hell up out of here.
Right.
At the end of the day. So you can't let that reset just get in the way of what's happening. You know, it's messing up marriages and people trying to flex. They hanging on the jobs they hate. All of that.
So,
you know.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
That's so real. And I can absolutely attest to that. And I remember what you said, you got to like not be connected to the titles, because really, one, they're made up. I'm going to be honest, because people on LinkedIn type in what they want.
Everybody's CEO.
No shade, though, live your best life. I'm like, how you graduated in 2019? But it don't matter.
But you know what? So you just made me think of something.
Yeah.
When you start to talk to other people and you stop just looking at what's being presented, and so you start really talking to your friends and people you've gone to college with, you realize they aren't too much better off than you are. And you realize like, oh, I'm actually doing better than you. And so for me, when I turned 30, that's when I moved to Chicago. I turned 30. I started talking to some other friends, and it just really clicked. Stop looking at time. Stop looking at ages and when you need to have things done, because everyone has a different journey.
Yeah.
And so now, while I was previously married and had kids, and I was focused on that, and my other friends went the other way, we still at the same spot at this point. And so we get so caught up looking elsewhere. But when you get under all of that, you're like, man, y'all really got the same struggles that I have.
Absolutely.
And it's okay.
Totally.
But you get caught up on those optics.
You do.
On social media, and you feel like you got to be the boss. Like somebody's gonna look at you. I don't care what you do. Your bills paid and you happy. I'm not judging. Allison only a coordinator or a manager. Like,
And I
who
was
cares?
forever. Let me be 100.
Like,
I
who
literally
cares?
hired people that were like 2 years later had higher quote unquote titles.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna act like it didn't get in my head because I'm like, but it's fine. But
You had your own journey.
I had my own journey. And you know what? And to your point, I always say, like, you're on your own timeline. Like
Yep.
no one's on the same timeline. So when it happens for you, it's on time.
Yep.
And that's
real.
So it's so true. And you will just, to your point, you see that even though there's all these different timelines, you'll see that a lot of us have these crossroads where we end up, to your point, like, are we at the same spot? Many different roads to get there.
Yep.
But the important thing is we're both showing up there happy and content and grateful on whatever the journey that was.
Yep.
And even to touch back on, you were just saying like, okay, you didn't maybe like, you know, the job at Target, but you knew there was something to learn. That is the outlook that I had to learn early on as well, because I used to say like, there were some jobs that I just had that I'm like, I am absolutely miserable. And I'm sure I probably complained to you. I'm actually glad that you're still my friend, because I feel like it was times that you would text and I'm like, I really want to say something fun when you say how you doing, but then I'll just be like, yeah, I hate where I am. But being fully,
and that you being real keeps it real for me to know that it's okay to not always be
have it together,
happy. Like, no, it's rough, bro. It's rough right now. Okay, I feel you. Keep your head up.
But but as you were saying, there was something to be learned at all those jobs, either by great experience or negative. I learned something, and it's so funny that now, like sometimes I was put on clients where I'm like, this just isn't my wheelhouse. But what I do now, like I'm literally pulling from those experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, because cycle's gonna come back around. It's somebody, quote unquote, you know, off the chain everywhere you work. It's always some person that doesn't, like all of that exists everywhere. So you really have to be in a confident space and where you are and do what you need to do for yourself. So I'm not gonna switch gears, but you said so much and I had to just keep up with everything you were saying because you were saying so much, had so many good nuggets. It was interesting when we were talking about where you're curious, you might want to explore. And I was going to say, I promise you I was gonna say this, but I was like, I feel like those are for people with a very strong entrepreneurial mindset. And then right before I could circle back, you had talked about being an entrepreneur and all that kind of stuff. And so and whether that comes, you know, again, in the cycle and journey that you're on, that's one thing. But you can have an entrepreneurial mindset and not, quote unquote, own your business, but it's still a mindset of like, you can work a certain way. And so I just thought that was interesting that you did say that. So that's one point I wanted to make, because you do need to understand how to be a go-getter, a self-starter, a researcher, a strategist on your own. And that's where you will thrive, because you just want to know the information. The other thing I wanted to point out, and I can say that I didn't know your story about Target or anything, but hearing it is so interesting, Kevin, because what I know about you is you are definitely a reach back type of guy. Like you don't leave people in the, it's not like you just leave people in the dust, like, ooh, that was me, here I am now. Yes, I am the director, excuse me. No, you're definitely like, you look out, you were, there was some points you were just sending me job posts, like, consider this, you know? And I'm clearly not the only one. I'm positive that our mutual community who knows us will listen to this and be like, that's absolutely who he is. And it's so interesting as I was listening to your story and just hearing about your journey, that is something that is a very clear thing that you are aware of. So I'd love for you to kind of just talk about why you feel that is important. I mean, it's so much of who you are, but knowing that, like, you just, I mean, like I said before, you are a boss now. I mean, I know you said branding professional and whatnot, but knowing where you are now, why is it so important for you to, you know, look out for others? And to be honest, that's not everybody's ministry, but you do it so well.
Man, that's loaded. I got a few responses. I'll try to be as concise as possible because there's so much in there. Sure. One is I saw a quote and I just live by it now, and it's be who you needed when you were younger.
I love it.
And thinking back, like, you know, my dad's awesome, but he he'll be 70 this year. So he started his career in a much different time and rose through the ranks of the bank. I think up to like an SVP by the time he retired.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing he can tell me about the workforce in the 2000s, 99 to 2000s.
Right.
And especially as a son who is creative, entrepreneurial, all of that. And if I've had way more failures than my dad had in his life. So there's a limit. But what I think is impossible, what I think is important is to have someone who isn't afraid to share those experiences, to let you know life goes on, dropping out of school, getting divorced, being fired. I've been all of that. But life goes on. But sometimes you need to see that. You need to see somebody doing that in real time. And professionally, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't know what that was. And part of it was because I didn't think I needed one, because I thought I was liver than I really was. And so you just keep bumping your head through your career thinking, this just isn't for me. Or they didn't like me for whatever reason. And you realize, no, there's some training and some guidance and some coaching needs to happen. But the other part of it is I am tired of us being left out of certain conversations. And so, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of some great training programs in my career and some great professional development. I've had some great leaders that pour into me, but that's just me.
Right.
And the rest of my community is left behind.
Right.
So how do I take what I've learned from these great opportunities, these blessings, bring those back into the village?
Yeah.
Because the things that I'm learning will set me up to keep climbing. And those are the same things that everyone else next to me, not necessarily behind, but next to me won't even know is why they won't go. They won't be able to progress. And so there's that. And then I'm tired of being the first Black man, first Black person, only Black person to do anything, not even just in marketing communications, on this leadership team, on this group, on this committee, on
right.
It's not a badge of honor to me. I'm tired of it because I'm always fighting something or arguing or advocating for, which I'm going to do, but that doesn't mean it gets, the load gets lighter. And so if I can take these resources and connect you with somebody or share something with you that helps, helps that pipeline, like, why not? It doesn't cost me anything just to spend some time and pour back.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so good. I love when you say you got to bring it back to the village, because honestly we do. And I think there's something to just, whether you feel like it's human nature for you or not, like we're really not out here to be competing or comparing. And there's clearly strength in us holding each other down. And honestly, I love that you do that. Like, even with the Facebook group that I still feel like I want to say does not have a name, and that is the name.
It doesn't have a name, right?
It doesn't have a name. But I remember it kind of started because we were all in this space of like, well, we don't have a group.
Yeah.
And it was a lonely place. But then to be able to have that spearheaded was just helpful, even if it's just drop a question, or no matter how random
or
it
to
is,
vent.
it's clearly like, hey, I have a safe space to do it with people who have had similar experiences, or even if it's just for levity purposes, like, listen, it's been a day and I just need to understand why this rapper had these 2 bars that I just didn't care for. So I mean, either way, it's therapeutic and it's necessary.
Yeah.
And for you to be able to like I said, it may not be everybody's thing, but I want to just clearly say, on the air, that it is much appreciated. Because I definitely was someone who moved to Chicago like,
this is not the crib.
This is not the crib. And to be honest, like, yes, I can network, but I was doing my thing so much.
It's a lot.
I didn't have time to be all up in, or the first question was like, what high school did you go to when you went
Absolutely
here? And I'm like,
absolutely
go here, or who I knew and not recognize any of these names. I mean, so if I appreciate that, I felt like,
and if I'm correct, it took another Detroiter in another state to put us together.
It absolutely did.
Okay.
It absolutely did. So
I wanted to put that out there. This is how Detroit moves. We don't care
listen
where you are. We will connect people from the crib.
And we out here connect.
We out here.
Listen. And like Kevin, you was the plug because they was like, oh, you know Kevin? I'm like, yeah, you know. So you know, I'm can I get in, you know? But no, most definitely. I just appreciate you so much. When you were talking about the being able to reach back, and in that being vulnerable and okay and telling your true story. Now, obviously, there's wisdom in that. You don't have to go around confessing everything that you did wrong.
Right.
That's one thing that I will say, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm on the other side of this, but I'm definitely so much better of, that vulnerable piece of leadership.
Yeah.
Because especially as a Black woman, used to being 100, like there's been a narrative that you don't need to be vulnerable in certain places. That's just not a good look. Like other colleagues who cry at work, that was not an option. You need to pull that together and wait till you get to the car. But it wasn't available. And beyond even work, how as we talked about earlier, people present this perfected life on social, which is fun. So I'm not asking y'all to like post eviction notices and stop using filters, because sometimes we appreciate it. But
filter gang.
Yeah, but I think there's something really powerful to being okay talking about your scars, right? Like I do think there's wisdom in like protecting wounds until they can heal, but I also think there's something powerful in being like, once it's healed, being like, yeah, this is a scar, like this happened, it was real, and here I am, here's what I learned from it. And when you said,
two thoughts.
That's so true.
Yeah, I have two thoughts on that. I think one, when you can keep it real, it's less, it's not a task to keep up.
Yeah.
And like you said, you got to know when to dial it up and when to dial it down. And this is something that I have to, talk to my oldest son about, is just, your life is made up of experiences. But what you can't do is let those experiences become your brand.
Yes.
Where when people see you coming, they already know what you're going to vent about. And if you're on social media, you're always, crying about something or venting about something. And it's like, that becomes who you are. And so you don't want to define who you are, but that's what made you who you are. And being able to dial it up and down and keep it real, like you'll realize that your friends will, I'll get inboxes sometimes where I'll post something about being divorced or, being fired from a job or something like that. Somebody will inbox me and they'll be like, oh, I'm glad that reminds me of so-and-so. But I can do that now.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to pull a little space.
Absolutely.
Between your valley before you preach about it for two reasons. One, you're not on the other side enough to speak about what you saw.
Right.
Because you still there.
Oh, that's good.
And sometimes you got to get to the other side and, be able to climb up a little bit and look down and be like, I got over that.
Yeah.
I know what happened. When you're in the middle of it, you can't talk about it. It's too fresh. You don't know what you think you know. Right. So give it a little breathing room.
Yeah.
Before you talk about it. And then even then, like sometimes that just needs to be a text.
Yeah.
I got a little circle of dudes, we all married with kids and all this stuff. And I can talk to them. I'm not going to Facebook with it. Or like you said, at work, choosing when to be vulnerable. Like we've seen data saying being closed off isn't as live as we thought it was. Meaning, people like, oh, Kevin's solid. Being vulnerable, like, what, today's a rough day. This is the day my mom died. So it's a rough day for me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Or, what, I'm just tired today. Like my boss checked in with me last summer. We talk all the time. I don't want to make it seem like she checked in with the check the box, check on my Negro workers.
Right.
But she was like, there's a lot going on and I want you to understand where I'm coming from with this. It's coming from a genuine place of concern. How are you feeling? And it was funny because she boxed it in, it's kind of like, it's not like they told us to do this. We have a good rapport.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? No, I'm not. Yeah. So I will holler at you tomorrow. I'm like, okay, cool. She checked back later. You good? Everything good? We're good now. Thank you for giving me that space. I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna front like I am, you
Yeah.
know.
That's that's a whole couple words. I feel like I want to re-listen to what you said because I was trying to write that down, but that was really good. Because I learn on these episodes too. But yeah, that's absolutely true. Everything you stated. It was funny you were saying how you got to be careful about how much you portray yourself, even on social media, because it becomes your brand.
Mhm.
And literally, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, the minute you said how much you were talking about the passion behind your brand, I have it written down right here. It's chicken scratch, so I can't show it. But I was gonna say, what out of all the information you know about branding, what effective branding is, whether it's for an organization or a person, and you kind of touched on it, I just want you to expand. What are the ties and similarities between, from an industry place? Yes, I know all the keys to branding appropriately, but what could you pull from an industry space and say, like, why is it important to brand yourself? Like outside of you being an influencer, just your life, the importance of
Mhm.
branding and creating a brand for your life and what that looks like from a best bet standpoint.
Whew. I would say it's important because you represent so many other things.
Mm,
Um, I represent myself. I represent my wife. I represent where I work.
yep.
Represent Phi Beta Sigma. I represent all of these different entities. You know, Eastern Michigan, Redford High School, all of the people that raised me. And so you want to be mindful of that. Like you're representing a lot more than yourself. Two, like this is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big fan of being authentic. And that's that's a whole conversation that I've been debating. I want to have online about, but being authentic. And so the Kevin you get here is the Kevin you're gonna get at work. And that doesn't require me to code switch, do anything. I just use timing, tone, and tact for everything. But I think it's important because our lives are so interconnected now. So this plays into where you work. This plays into uh, recommendations
Mm-hmm.
for grad school, which I had to go through
Right.
recently. But then there's always somebody watching, and whether we like that or not, like somebody is looking up to us. We are someone's uh, excuse for who they are,
Yeah.
whether that's good or bad. And so I I want my personal approach to that is I want to be a positive representation of what it looks like to be able to come from a neighborhood high school in Detroit
Mm-hmm.
and thrive
Yeah.
despite what the narrative is out there. So that's kind of my thing. It's how can I be a good representation, show people what's possible,
Yeah.
and just be consistent across the board. This is
Yeah.
who I am, and this is who you can rely on. So um, just like brands, that's important. Is what you put out there is what you get back, and that's people's perception of you,
Yeah.
and that's their reality because
Yeah.
that's all they know. So I curate that space pretty strategically. It's not like I have to hide anything. I don't say everything that I'm thinking.
Right.
If I
Right.
do, sometimes it's a text. Um, I want people to know that I'm interested in these things so I can connect with like-minded people. You find so many different synergies based on what you put out there. It's just representation. That's the big thing with that personal brand, and that can play out in whatever avenue.
Yeah. I absolutely love that because I definitely wrote down like you represent a lot more than yourself, and that's so
Mhm.
true to your point, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And I can't say where I heard this before, but I always think like what came to mind when you said that was like you are a vital person in someone's life that you don't even know.
I believe that
You
100%.
don't even know who they are, but to them, you play a vital role, whether you like it or not. And so
Hmm.
to even think about that, that's just, I mean, it's weighty, but it's necessary. And I
Yeah.
think people should check in on that.
Yeah. I think it gives you For some people, it gives them purpose. And for others, it gives them some guardrails to stand between. My whole job is presenting and packaging things for other people to consume. That is my whole life. And so it's no different in my personal life. I package what I want you to consume about me. I mean, it's, and it's, it's not going to be fraudulent or anything like that, but I want to make sure I curate that space. And so when you speak about me, you hear about me, it's going to be consistent.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Brand.
Yep.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And to feel like what we experience is what we saw that drew us. The initial draw that drew us is what we experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. I don't know whether to like go to our closing segments or have a benediction. I really don't know. I just don't know. It was such a good word. I mean, I could put at least like 8 things you said into like a meditation journal. So thank you for sharing. That it's super powerful and really on time. I'm sure for everybody, because you do need to give thought to these things at some point. And I think a lot of us sometimes get in this purgatory of struggle because we're not leaning into our curiosities. We're not being open and transparent and seeking out people who may have struggled where we have struggled to say like, hey, how can I get through this? We're not branding ourselves correctly. We're not reaching back. All of the things you talked about, like these are very key steps to getting out of that valley so you can look back and learn. And I think you literally, to say what you just said, you pack it super well. So I hope that people can just take all of that insight and grow with it, because it was very clear and super helpful. So thank you for that. Okay, so this quick segue, because one of the things I'm asking every guest this season, knowing that, life has these hard times and you have to have this perseverance, we always know that in every great movie, at the pinnacle of the overcome, at the top of the mountain, there's a good soundtrack underneath it. And so like, what is your song that you go to when you need to be inspired, or you need to be encouraged, or you need to just scream? What's that song for you?
Duck If You Buck.
Oh, listen, I was hoping you would say it.
That's it doesn't matter if I'm on my way to a meeting. It doesn't matter if I'm feeling down. I put that on and start hopping around the office and throwing bows, and if I had dreads, I'd be shaking them. But that's it. Like that little J on the track. Like I will get loose with it. And everybody knows it, because anytime it pops up, somebody texts me, "Oh, I heard this and thought of you." But yeah, that is it. I don't know why. When it happens.
Energy. I feel like it's on my little workout track, but I promise you this, I don't care how tired I am at the juncture, you get this energy that's like, nah, like I'm out here, I'm ready. I think
some of it's nostalgia too.
It does.
I think when that came out, that was what, like 04, 05 or so. So I was only maybe a couple of years in the frat. I'm young. And life was not as complicated. So you like, man, let me just escape back for a minute and then just let loose with it.
And it's the energy, even the energy in the nostalgia. Like it was one of those things, like it don't matter what played before, that everybody got live, everybody sang and rapped at the same time.
Yep.
Everybody that was about to leave is going to stay a little bit longer.
Let's go back in here real quick.
Yeah, real quick. Right after this, I'm going to leave.
Right.
Unless they play Soulful Moaning, and then we know it's really over. But yes.
Soulful Moaning. Oh, listen, wow. The throwback.
If the DJ knew what they were doing in from Detroit. But Duck If You Buck for sure was like, oh, we are all in this good choir. That's
like a millennial, like a new millennium Negro spiritual.
That's it.
Everybody knows it. It's like it's only a few songs that are in that elite status. It's Duck If You Buck, Swag Surf, and Back That Thing Up.
And you really just need
that's like the Holy Trinity.
It is like right there. That's what you That's what you have. So yes, thank you for sharing. That is so true. I felt that.
People probably see me on train like he listening to something whack, like I'm really thugging it out, holding back these bows on here. Right.
We're right when this is over. Because the lyrics are already in my head. So listen, you had all this great things to say, and I know that there's some people who will probably want to just learn more about branding, hear more from the wisdom that you have to share. Not even trying to be funny with that, like genuinely want to do that. And I want to give you an opportunity to kind of just share where they can find you on your social platforms. I'm going to go ahead and put a shameless plug, like he's a great person to have on a panel for youth, for professionals to talk about branding. But I want to give people a way to reach out to do that.
Yep. You can catch me on Instagram under Kevin Davis Brand, or the League of Leaders, which is the podcast.
Yes.
KevinDavisBrand.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. It's about 6,000 of us. But if you put like Kevin Davis Detroit or something, I'm sure I'll pop up.
Totally.
In there. Yeah. I'm not too hard to find putting those words in there.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to make sure on the podcast description that I have that spelled out for you all too to listen to. Listen, Kevin, I thank you so much for taking the time today to just kind of share all this good information with the listeners. I just appreciate you. I thank you for just making Chicago feel like home. And then even when I was like, you caught me before I was gonna send this email. The Lord knew before I pressed send. So I just want to thank you for that. And even the wisdom you share with me, even with this podcast, just making sure I have my ducks in a row and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't go unseen. And I know you don't do it for the image, but I still wanted to acknowledge that within the podcast. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
All right. So everyone, make sure you continue to listen each week to the episode Page My Book. Thank you for joining us today. Have a marvelous week.
It's been real.
So